Working with CSS in the last couple of years, there are some things I'm always frustrated at. Like, I wonder, why is this the default? Why is it not different? And I know some of these things have their historical reasons, but I really wish they could be better. And then I came across this website recently, and this website is from the CSS working group. And as you can see, incomplete list of mistakes in the design of CSS. And a couple of these mistakes here, I really agree with, and these are some of the things that have frustrated me. Well, in this video, I'll be going through some of these mistakes and also showing you some examples of how they actually apply. Okay, white space no wrap should be white space no wrap. Okay, there should be a hyphen instead of combining it together. Okay, fine. Animation iteration count should have just been animation count. And I really agree with this one, because when you're adding animations, you have animation iteration count, which allows you to specify how many times the animation will play. So here you can add 1, you can add 2, you can add infinite if you want it to repeat forever. But I do agree that this name is just so long. Animation count would have just been fine. Although animation iteration count seems more logical, because if you're saying animation count, then it's like, how many animations? Are there 5 different animations or 6 different animations? But then with iteration count, you know, we're talking about the iteration or the repetition. So while this is more logical in my opinion, I think this would be nice and will probably save us few milliseconds of writing text. Then the next one I want to point out is that box sizing should be border box by default. Oh, I totally agree with this one. I have a video on box sizing where I went into detail. I'll leave a link in video description so you can check it out. So this is how box sizing applies. This is our box here, and if I should inspect this, when I highlight on this, you can see that the dimensions are 100 by 100. But then by default, elements have a box sizing of content box. And what this means is that the width and the height you specify is going to be for the content. If you should add padding, if you should add border, all of this is going to contribute to the dimensions of the box. So now if I should highlight on the box, you can see that the dimensions is now 148 by 148. So the padding and the border contributed to the space occupied by the box. But then when you have border box, what you're saying is that this width and this height should also accommodate the border and the padding, so the box doesn't change. Now if I highlight on this, you can see that it stays 100 by 100. And usually when you're writing CSS, one of the default things that you do is you have your asterisk selecting every element, and then you have box sizing border box. Like, you literally see this in almost every CSS. I'm pretty sure you also do it too. And that is why I really agree with this part that says box sizing should be border box by default, because with border box, it helps you avoid a lot of unexpected results. When you have your width and your height, you know that the border and the padding is not going to affect that. Background size with one value should duplicate its value. The not default, the second one, to auto. Actually, this makes a lot of sense, because when you're working with background size, if you want to use length values, you can either pass just one value, which is the width, and you can also pass the height. Now, if you provide just one value, 20 pixels like this is going to be for the width, and the height will be auto. But what this is saying is that the second value should just duplicate. So if you have 20 pixels, that means 20 pixels should be for the width and 20 pixels for the height, instead of the second one being auto. And the same thing also applies to translate. If you have translate, if you pass just one value, this is going to apply to the X coordinate, and the Y coordinate by default will be 0. But what this is also saying is that with translate, when you use 10 pixels like this, it should just apply 10 pixels for the other one instead of defaulting it to 0, unless you want to explicitly use something else. I won't really consider this as like a huge mistake, but I do agree that it will make things easier, because I've often found myself trying to do 10 pixels. To be nice if the Y coordinate can just be the same as the X coordinate. This one says Z index should be called Z order or depth. I do agree that Z order or depth is actually more logical than Z index. Although if you're very familiar with stacking context and Z index, then you probably don't have a problem with this being called index. But I do agree that a more logical name would be other or there. By the way, I have a video on stacking context. You should definitely check it out. Border radius should have been corner radius. Actually, I kind of agree with this, because when you have a border radius and then you apply 10 pixels, if we should go back to this, it is actually applied on the corners. Unless when you use a value like 50%, then it kind of looks like the radius is applied on the whole border. But I do agree that corner radius would be a more logical name. But again, I don't really consider this as a huge mistake. Then this part here says that placeholder pseudo element should be placeholder text, and placeholder shown pseudo class should be placeholder. I'm not really sure. So when you have an input, and let's just put a placeholder of enter name here in this style, I can style the placeholder text by using the placeholder pseudo element. So I can say this should have a color of red, but you can see the placeholder is color red, but the normal text is still black. And then I can also use the placeholder shown pseudo class to say if a placeholder is showing, the input should have a border of red. Let me just turn off the outline for this. So when the placeholder is showing, we have a border of red, but when the placeholder is no longer showing, we lose that border. But this is saying that placeholder should be placeholder text and placeholder shown should be called placeholder. I'm not really sure I agree with that. I actually love this placeholder shown pseudo class and then the placeholder pseudo elements, but I don't know if you think differently. And there are a couple of more mistakes, but this is my best mistake. I don't know if that's a good way to put it. It shouldn't be important that reads to engineers as not important. We should have picked another way to write this. I totally agree. So if you want to ensure that this width is not overwritten by something else in the cascade, then you would have importance like this. But then if you're used to other programming languages like JavaScript, this is called a negating operator. And what this does, well, if we should go to the JavaScript world, if you have a value and this has maybe true, and then you have another value, and then you do something like this, what you're saying is negate the value of this variable. Now the value of this variable is true, which means another value is going to hold false. So this operator works in a logical context by negating values to their logical opposite. So when you have it like this in CSS, what this is reading is not important, just as this says here. It reads to engineers as not important. So I do agree that this should be something else. Maybe even having an exclamation at the beginning and at the end might be nice, or maybe an asterisk at the beginning and the end might be nice, but I do agree that another syntax should be used for declaring important property value pairs. Anyways, this was an interesting page. I'll leave a link below. You can actually check it out. It's interesting to see how CSS has evolved in the last couple of years, where some things that were seen as normal now have some abnormal look to it. Is there any default in CSS that you also consider a mistake, and maybe it's on this list or not on this list? Let me know in the comments below. I'm very interested in seeing your thoughts. By the way, I have a lot of demos on my channel where I show how to build amazing stuff with CSS. You should see some of them currently on the screen. You can click on any of them.